Story time of why it's never good to be in a best friend group of 3. So a little background information. I was in 4th grade and I was 9 years old, about to turn 10. Now I know you're thinking that's really young. Well sis, I was just smart enough to see the red flags early on, unlike half of you who probably didn't see them. Anyway, so I had 2 friends we're gonna call the one Becky and the one Mia. Now let me tell you a little bit about Becky. Becky was kind of a bitch. Now anytime that she saw Mia and I having our own conversation, she would pretty much bully us. And she would have 2 of her other friends tag along and do it also, Brooklyn and Riley. So the one day we're walking to PE and Mia and I are having a conversation. And in our gym class, you had to line up in groups of 3. So it would go Mia, Becky, and then me. Well, because I wanted to finish my conversation with Mia, I decided to sit in Becky's spot. So we're sitting down and then Becky marches over to where we're sitting and just stands there and stares at us. Then she walks away and goes and sits with her other friends. And at the end of gym class, she comes back over to us. Like for part 2. Part 2 about why it's never good to be in a best friend group of 3. So like I said, Brittany hated it whenever Mia and I would have our own conversation. And I sat in Becky's spot in gym class. And then she got mad at us because I wanted to finish my conversation with Mia. So she goes over with her other friends that literally bully Mia and I. So at the end of gym class, she walks up to both of us with Brooklyn. And she literally is just standing there. And then Brooklyn goes, "Do you need me to do it for you?" Me and I look at each other like, what the fuck is going on? And then Brittany's like, "No, I just wanted to tell you guys that I don't want to be friends with you anymore." She was like, "You guys are just so fake. Like, you never include me in anything." Which was completely not true, but we were like, whatever. So then the next day at school, Brittany comes up to Mia and I, and she's like, "Hey guys." Like, this bitch was bipolar as fuck. And we're like, "We thought you didn't want to be friends with us anymore." And she was like, "No, I just meant I didn't want to be best friends." Story time about how my best friend started seeing my mom. So we're going to call my best friend Joey. Joey and I had been best friends since we were 4 years old. And my family was really close with his and vice versa. And she had always been really nice to him. Of course, because he was a family friend and he was my best friend. Well, one day I thought that she liked him a little bit more than she liked me. She would always ask the weirdest questions. Like, "Oh, is Joey single?" Or, "What's Joey's sexuality?" Like, sis had a whole ass husband. But at the time, I didn't think anything of it because I just thought that she really wanted him and I to date. But when he turned 15, things started getting a little bit weirder. Like, sometimes he would go over my house right after school, even when I wasn't there, to hang out with my mother. And usually the only time he was at the house was whenever him and I were hanging out. Well, the one day I walked in and they were both sitting on the couch talking. And when they both saw me, they acted like nothing was wrong with it. Like for part 2 about how my best friend started seeing my mom. So like I said, the one day I come home after school and they're both sitting on the couch already talking. And they look at me and say hi as if nothing was wrong with the situation. And then after that, Joey started mentioning how my mom was so hot. And I was like, "Yeah, no, she's pretty, but that's it." Well, the one day my mom left for work earlier than she usually does. So I messaged my dad and asked him if he wanted to hang out. So of course he said yes, and 5 hours later I came home and I go upstairs. And I'm just like hearing things from my mother's bedroom. So I go up and I open the door. And because I don't want this video to get taken down, you guys probably can guess what I saw. So I ran out of the room, ran downstairs. I start panicking. And Joey came and hugged me and said, "I'm sorry, me and your mom just love each other." So I told them both they were absolutely disgusting. So then my mom starts crying and begging me to forgive her. And now I live with my dad. Story time about why you should never, ever, ever do drugs. So a little background information. In my town, on the 15th of June this year, 2 girls got kidnapped in my hometown. So I kind of knew these 2 girls. I mean, they went to my school, but that was really it. Because low-key, I didn't want to be friends with them, and I kind of hated them. They were in 7th grade, I was in 8th grade, so they were probably like a year younger than me. Anyway, so it was a Wednesday, and the last time they had been seen was at 8 p.m. with a 30-year-old man. They were supposedly doing drugs outside of a McDonald's. Well, I guess this man saw that they had been doing drugs, and he wanted some. Before that, I guess he kind of eased into the question because he was like talking to them, getting to know them, and I guess he thought he had a really good shot at getting some drugs. But when he asked, they said no. So then he asked a few more times and they finally gave them to him. But whenever they got closer, he grabbed both of them, put him in his van, and drove off. And he hid them in his house. Like for part 2. Part 2 of why you should never, ever, ever do drugs. So like I said, he asked for them again, and finally the girls decided to give him some. But when they got closer, he grabbed both of them and shoved them in his van, drove off. Well, he ended up driving to his house and decided to hide them there. Well, one of the girls' aunts posted something on Facebook saying that both of them were missing, and soon the news made an article that literally said, drug addict and her friend gets kidnapped. They went missing for like 6 days, and on the 22nd of June, they were found, but now they won't stop bragging about how fun it was to get kidnapped. And that is why, still to this day, I absolutely despise these girls. Story time about how he cheated on his baby mama with me. So a little background information. There was this boy, and we're going to call him John. John and I knew each other through one of our mutual friends. Well, 24/7, John would post sad quotes on his Snapchat story because him and his girlfriend had just broken up. So I decided that I was going to be Captain Save-A-Ho and be there for him, telling him it was okay and that everything happens for a reason. Well, eventually, John had developed a huge crush on me. Like, he would flirt with me 24/7, sending me all these cute emojis. And of course, my dumbass fell for it. So after talking for a little bit, him and I started dating. Well, the one day I was on Snapchat going through his story, and he was posting a bunch of funny memes on his story, and I was just laughing until I got to the last thing that he posted on his story. It was this picture of a baby girl saying, "I can't wait to meet you from Dada." So with my crazy ass, I jumped on the phone and started cussing him out. And then he goes, "What are you talking about? That's my little sister." Like for part 2. Part 2 about how he cheated on his baby mama with me. So like I said, when I confronted him about it, he said that it was a picture of his baby sister. Always with the Alabama shit. For what reason, I don't know. But he calls me the next day and he starts apologizing about everything. And then he decides to make a new Snapchat account and starts talking to me on there, thinking that I was just gonna block his other account. He posts a picture of his baby mama. So at this point, my Virgo self and I were done with the bullshit. By the way, he's a Gemini, so if that doesn't explain it, I don't know what will. So I start dating my new man, and I commented on all of his posts. I guess I'm not surprised she's not the only bitch you're fucking with. And if you try lying, I'm going to spill the tea. Like, I just think that it's really funny how females just think that their men are so loyal, even when you literally expose their man with every piece of evidence. Well, the girl who sent this in has a special message for all of us. I promise you that men ain't shit. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. Storytime about how I found my uncle sleeping with my best friend. So a little background information. I was 18 at the time and a freshman in college. My uncle was a National Guard, and we were the same age, we went to the same school, and we also had the same friends. And while he was away, I had made one friend that he didn't know about. Her and I became best friends, we got into the same college, and we were in the same dorm room together. Well, the one day my uncle came to my college to surprise me. I ran up to him, I gave him a big hug, and my best friend was super confused because I had never introduced them. And when I introduced them, there was this weird, awkward vibe. So all three of us went back to the dorm room, and I asked her if it was okay that he spent the night, because I didn't want to be that person to just invade her space. So she ended up saying yes, and eventually we all got really hungry, and we all wanted Chick-fil-A, so I went and I left them all alone in the room together. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how I found my uncle sleeping with my best friend. So like I said, I went to go get us Chick-fil-A and I left them in the dorm all alone together. While I was waiting in line, I called them to ask what they wanted and nobody answered the phone. So I was like, okay, whatever, it's fine. They're probably just busy talking. So I low-key took a long time because I went to the grocery store to get some cookies. I was just craving them. So then I get back to the dorm room. As soon as I open the door, I see both of them unclothed on top of each other on the bed, doing the nasty. So for some reason, I had a broom and I threw it at my uncle and I went to my friend's apartment that night. And when I told my mom about it, she said that it was my fault because weirdly enough, they praised all the boys in my family. Storytime about how my boyfriend found out that I was cheating on him with his best friend. So a little background information. We're gonna call my boyfriend Tyler. Tyler and I had been dating since he was 16 and I was 13. And now it was my freshman year in high school and his senior year. And we're gonna call his best friend Jaden. Now there was one really big problem with Tyler and I's relationship. I was pretty much dating Jaden too. Now if you don't get what I mean by that, Jaden was there for literally every single thing that we did in our relationship. Anytime I would invite Tyler over, guess who was walking in right behind him? Jaden. Anytime that Tyler and I went on dates, guess who was there? Jaden. and there wouldn't even be another girl there. He would literally just third wheel on our dates. And I talked to Tyler about it before, and he's like, well, I don't know what you want me to do. He's my best friend. So fast forward, the one day Tyler and Jaden are both over my house, like for part 2. Part 2 about how my boyfriend found out that I was cheating on him with his best friend. So like I said, Jaden and Tyler are both at my house, and Tyler ends up getting a call. And it was his mom telling him that his brother had just passed away. So Tyler told Jaden that he needed to find a ride home. And after that, Tyler left immediately. Now me, I do not know what the hell to do. Because Jaden and I had never been left alone before. And it wasn't really because Tyler didn't trust us. It was more of though we didn't really have a reason to be alone together. So that night, he was supposed to wait for my parents to get home so that way they could drive him. But I ended up getting him an Uber because he said that he liked me and I did not know what to do. Fast forward, while my boyfriend is in the grieving stages, I was messing with his best friend behind his back. And the one day he had walked in on us doing spicy things. And after, he had his whole family posting things about me on Facebook saying that I was a whore and everything. Story time about the girl who tried to talk me into doing the nasty with her dad. Literally. So a little background information. 2 months before this whole situation, I had met her through one of my friends at a party. She was really funny, really nice. We're gonna call this girl Jessie. So when my friend and I left the party, I had asked her about Jessie, and she was like, oh, I wouldn't really hang around her. She's just like a really weird person. Now, I didn't really take my friend's word for it, mainly because in the past, my friend has gotten really jealous whenever I've started hanging out with other people. So I decided to find out for myself, which now I realize that was probably not one of my best ideas. So a few weeks later, we hung out with her again, and I got her number that night. Her and I started hanging out a lot. And her and I were both seniors in high school. Well, when I would go over to her house, her dad would be super weird around me. He would just be very overly nice and touchy with me. And her mom and her dad were divorced. Well, the one night I'm sitting in Jessie's room and she comes upstairs and she's like, OMG, I have to tell you what my dad said. Like for part 2. Part 2 about the girl who tried to talk me into doing the nasty with her dad. Literally. Like I said, she comes upstairs to her bedroom and she's like, OMG, I have to tell you what my dad just said about you. And she would literally do this all the time. She would be like, oh, my dad just said that you're so pretty. Or my dad just said that if you were his age, he would totally date you. And just like super weird things like that. Well, I was like, oh, like what did he say? And she was like, OMG, I feel so weird telling you. Like I really don't want to tell you. She was like, I feel like you'll think he's weird. Low-key, she didn't know that I already thought that he was weird. But I was like, oh, okay. She was like, okay, fine, I'll just tell you. My dad said that he would totally fuck you. And I was like, oh, that's really gross. Like, he's really fucking weird for that. And she was like, no, you should totally do it. And I was like, no, I'm good. Like, that does not make me feel comfortable. And she was like, dude, you don't understand. He'll pay you. And her dad was super rich, like he owned 4 of his own companies and everything. But still, that was not enough to bribe me to do it with this man. So I grabbed my stuff and I am like about to walk out of her room. And she's like, wait, no, don't go. Like I was just joking. And I was like, no, I'm still gonna leave. And she was like, no, please don't. Like, how are you gonna get home? I'm not driving you. So I start walking down the stairs and I stop and look into the living room and I see her dad laying naked on the couch, just watching the stairs. It's like he was literally waiting for me to come down here to do the nasty with him. So I start running out the door and her dad chases me and he's like, hey, like, where are you going? What's wrong? And I'm like covering my eyes. I turn around and I'm like, you're what's fucking wrong. You're so fucking gross. After that, she texted me begging me not to tell anybody and I don't really see her anymore except for when we go to parties and she just happens to be there.
Story time, my best friend cheated on his girlfriend with me. So a little background information. So Gavin and I had been best friends ever since we were little. We lived in the same neighborhood, and my parents and his grandparents were, like, pretty close, I guess. But, like, everybody in our neighborhood was close with each other. And I always had a huge crush on him. And I would try to, like, subtly tell him that I liked him. But he would always be like, ew, don't joke with me like that. Like, that's not true. And eventually, I just kind of got the hint that that was his way of telling me, I don't like you. Stop before I tell you in a mean way. So when we were in middle school, he was always having these, like, 2-day relationships with all these girls and everything. And me, not so much because sis didn't have a glow up until she reached, like, her sophomore year in high school. And the thing was, I wasn't that best friend who would be like, ew, don't date her, like, she's ugly or anything like that. Like, I would totally respect all of his relationships, even if they were 2 days long, but he would literally still block me. Well, the one day we were hanging out at his house, like for part 2. Two, about how my best friend cheated on his girlfriend with me. So like I said, the one night I was at his house and he was on my phone and he was asking me who all these guys were on my Snapchat. And I told him that I had been talking to them and he was just being super toxic. He was talking shit on every single one of them. So eventually I started dating this guy Trey, and after that he texted me saying that I was gross and everything else, when the next day he literally got a girlfriend. But weirdly enough, he didn't block me that time. He actually started texting me more, saying how him and his girlfriend were so happy together, da-da-da-da-da. And unlike him, I would be supportive. Well, the one night at 2 a.m. he came over my house and he was like, I don't have feelings for my girlfriend. And I'm like, okay, then why are you with her? And then he has the nerve to say, don't you get that I like you? Like, really? Well, eventually we cut off all communication and he was still with this girl. Well, the one night he asked me to come over and talk, and we ended up doing the nasty. And then he blocked me on everything after he said we should both leave our girlfriends and boyfriends. Well, I ended up telling his girlfriend what we did, and they also come to my family cookout.